Hi, I'm Tara, and welcome to Les Do Books. Email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with any questions or comments, or come join the Facebook group, The Lesbian Review Book Club. I'm excited because I'm joined today by Camille Perri. Her second and most recent book, When Katie Met Cassidy, just came out this week, and it's available everywhere. Camille is here today to talk about other people's books. Authors are readers too, so I'm asking her about what lesbian fiction books she loves. Welcome, Camille.
Thank you for having me.
So, what's the first book you would like to talk about today?
The first book I'd like to talk about is Rose of No Man's Land by Michelle T. I think many people know and love Michelle T for her 2001 book Valencia, but I've always been total team Rose of No Man's Land. I think it's a much lesser known book, but it's always been one of my favorite novels since the first time I read it, and I've read it a number of times. I can't even tell you how many times. Just to tell you a little bit about it, the novel is narrated by Trisha Driscoll, who is in 10th grade and is maybe an alcoholic. She lives in a fictional white trash town in Massachusetts. She lives with her single mother, who's got some psychological problems and barely leaves the couch. She also has her mother's boyfriend living there, Donnie, who is overall just like a pretty awful guy. And she has a younger sister named Christy, who is trying to become a reality TV star by documenting their dysfunctional family. The first part of the book is mostly about Trisha's life at home and her job working at the local mall until she makes a new friend who also works at the mall named Rose. And everything sort of spins out from there, from the second these two girls meet. They go on a crystal meth-fueled adventure that is of epic proportions. And what I love about this book is it is like all big highs and big lows, lots of cynicism, big attitude. There's sex, sexuality, hitchhiking, fountain jumping. There's just total wild abandon in the way that only teenagers can really do it. Most of the action of the novel takes place over one day into one night. And I feel like that happens when you're a teenager, like in a way that it at least did for me. And I don't think happens the same way when you're an adult, where you could just have these like epic days and nights that then you just like remember forever.
Yeah, totally.
There's like an intensity, right? Like to the new experience and like new freedom that it's just never the same again once you're like a full-grown adult. The book came out in 2006, but I feel like it's got kind of a 90s, like late 90s feel to it, which I like because it was before social media like exploded and changed everybody's lives. I love this book so much. It's raw and funny, and it's just like a speedy adventure that at its heart is really just about female friendship. And, you know, it's like a coming of age novel. It's a really authentic voice. But the female friendship aspect of it is, it's just something I never get bored of reading.
That's very cool. So if you had to think of like who you would recommend it to, who do you think would especially love this book?
Anyone who likes sort of teenage stories of teenage girls getting into lots of trouble and sort of where the relationship eggs, like you egg each other on in a way. So there's this synergistic effect. One book that immediately comes to mind that came out just a year or two ago, it's not a lesbian novel, but it's about female friendship, called Marlena by Julie Bunton. And it's sort of the same idea where it's just sort of like these two souls connect and just like things just go on fire, you know?
Yeah. Okay, that sounds really good and like something that I want to check out.
I mean, are you familiar with Michelle T's other work? Like she's such a badass, and she's, you know, she was in Sister Spit back in the 90s. Like she was big in San Francisco, and she's just been a part of the queer community for so long. And she just keeps writing more and more books, and they're all just great.
No, I don't know any of her. I haven't read any of her books. So I know this is like you chose this book because you love it, but do you think this is a really good place to start with her books?
You know, I would say just like Google her books or look them up on her website or whatever and just choose the one that speaks to you the most. I don't think you necessarily need to start with this one.
Okay, cool. So, what is your next book?
The next book I would like to talk about is Bastard Out of Carolina by Dorothy Allison. It came out in 1992. It is Dorothy Allison's debut novel. It's semi-autobiographical, so it's set in the author's hometown, which is Greenville, South Carolina, in the 1950s. It's narrated by Ruth Ann Boatwright, who's called Bone. And as the title suggests, she is known as a bastard child, an illegitimate child born out of wedlock. She has a monster of a stepfather named Glenn, who beats her and sexually molests her. Without giving too much away of the plot, the gist of it is that Bone finds herself caught in a family struggle that really, really tests the loyalty of her mother. A lot of this novel is kind of hard to read because of the level of abuse that Bone experiences. But Dorothy Allison is just such a beautiful, beautiful writer that there's always a layer of empathy and attention that makes this novel a classic. It's actually been compared to other classics like Catcher in the Rye and To Kill a Mockingbird. And if you read it, you'll understand why. There's just a lyricism to Dorothy Allison's prose and her ear for speech and just the way she engages all of your senses. She just makes you feel things, really, really feel them, And that's what I love most about this book. There's difficulty in it, there's struggle, but there's also so much humor in it and heart. And, Dorothy Allison is just a truly rare talent. And I don't know if she's acknowledged enough for that. I just wish there were more people talking about Dorothy Allison. Mm-hmm. This novel tackles class and race and sexuality and gender and mother-daughter relationships. And the fact that so much of this novel is based on her own experience, her own childhood and adolescence, it only adds to the crazy power of this book and the effectiveness of this book. Because while you're reading it, we know where Dorothy Allison, the author, ends up. And you sort of have that in the back of your mind as you're reading about all of this abuse and hardship. So it only makes the character more heroic and just the book more of a heroic act, really.
How did you come to find this book? How did it come into your life?
I first learned of Dorothy Allison. So when I went to college, I went to NYU and I was an English major. And then I very quickly discovered gender and sexuality studies, which back then was, I'm old enough that it was still called women's studies. And it was through my gender and sexuality studies classes that I learned, I just learned about sexuality and gender in a totally different context. And that only wasn't in the form of the nonfiction texts that I read and the articles and the essays, but also we would sometimes read memoir or novels or fiction. And that was where I was first introduced to Dorothy Allison. She's written nonfiction as well. She also wrote a short story collection called Trash. So she was just a figure that was introduced to me as part of the LGBTQ canon in a way. And then the more I learned about her and read her, the more I fell in love with her. And I've seen her speak in person. I went to a writer's workshop called Tin House in Portland, Oregon a bunch of years ago, and Dorothy Allison was one of the guests there. And just hearing her talk about writing in person just was incredible. And a lot of stuff's online, on YouTube. If you're curious, you can just Google it and see some of her craft talks. And I promise she'll just blow you away.
That's amazing. I'm going to have to look that up. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, yeah, totally. My pleasure.
So what is the last book that you'd like to talk about?
The last book I would like to talk about is probably something most of your listeners are familiar with. It's Fun Home by Allison Bechdel. If anyone has not read Fun Home or seen the play, I can't even say enough about it. It's a graphic memoir by the cartoonist Allison Bechdel. I first encountered her work in college as well. She used to do a comic strip called Dykes to Watch Out For, which I think now you can buy in book form. I think they've archived them over the years in book form.
Yeah, you definitely can. My next door neighbor actually has it.
Oh, there you go. Okay, yeah. I'm glad to hear it. But reading Fun Home was just a life changer for me. And then getting to see it on stage years later on Broadway just changed my life all over again. For anyone who doesn't know, the story chronicles the author's life, her early life in rural Pennsylvania, and it focuses on her complicated relationship with her father. Her father is a historic preservation expert, and over the course of the book, he's restoring the family's Victorian home. He's also a third-generation funeral home director and a high school English teacher. And as if that weren't enough, he is also a closeted homosexual. And while we're learning about all of that, Allison will also come out to herself and to her family over the course of the story. But I mean, what I love most about it is it's about sexual orientation and gender and dysfunctional parents and suicide, but it's all through the lens of young Allison trying to understand herself and her family and where she fits into her family. And it's just so human and heartfelt. I'm generally not a reader of graphic novels, but the illustrations in Fun Home blew me away. It's just, I think it's a perfect example of like a case where I think the graphic content really enriches the written content in a really great way. Also, like, you know, Alison Bechdel is a dyke and she looks like a dyke and her drawings are of dykes. And like, it's no small thing to see that illustrated in a graphic novel, like in picture form. And then later to see the graphic novel adapted like for the stage, my experience of seeing Fun Home acted out on stage was just like, it gave me something that I needed that I didn't know that I needed until it was in front of me and there were tears running down my face. Like, just to see someone on stage who looked like me. I hadn't even realized that that was something that was missing from my life until there it was, you know? I don't know if you've seen it or if you've read it.
I actually haven't, and I feel like I need to now.
Oh, you really do. You really, really do. You're in for a real treat. You'll be so moved, I promise.
So who would you recommend this one to?
Honestly, anyone who's queer. And that's really, I had a friend who knew me fairly well, like pushed this book into my hands. And I had known Allison Bechdel's work, because I knew about Dykes to Watch Out For. But when I knew that it was I knew that it was called Fun Home and I knew that it was about a funeral home, I have like a dead bodies thing. And I was like, no. Like, I don't want to, I'm not into it. I don't want to see it. I also like don't really like graphic novels. I find like the pictures and the text to be distracting. I can't enjoy them both at once. And my friend was like, no, you need to read this book. And she just like gave it to me. And I'm so glad that she did because it spoke to me so much. Just a lot of the struggle that she goes through coming to terms with her sexuality in this family where she's sort of isolated and she's just figuring out things on her own. I feel like it's a book that no matter how good or bad your coming to terms with your sexuality was, or the coming out to your family was, there is something in here that will resonate with you and will make you feel seen. Yeah.
That's fabulous. I am going to go and look for it now.
You'll thank me later.
I probably will. You'll get an email.
I can't wait.
So, is there anything else that you want to share with people about your journey as a reader? I would love more time to read. The funny thing that I've realized about becoming a writer and like having that be my job now is that I have way less time to read. And I don't know. I don't know what that means in terms of my journey, but I hope that I can read more just for pleasure. I also read a lot of books that, sometimes people ask me to blurb a book or something that I'm reading because I'm going to review it or whatever. So
I think for anyone out there who gets to read just purely for their own pleasure, God bless you, and I hope to be able to do more of that soon too.
Yeah, I can understand that. Although I guess that's why I got into reviewing so much, so that I could at least focus on the books that I wanted to read.
Well, yeah, but do you get to pick that? You get to pick what you review yourself?
I do actually. I review at a few places. I'm a regular reviewer at the Lesbian Review and at Lambda Literary, and I pretty much get to choose what I want to review there. And then I was reviewing at Curve, and it was the same thing. So I'm pretty lucky.
You've got it figured out.
Yeah. But I'm also not a writer. I have never had the urge to write. I'm very much a consumer, and I love writing about other people's fiction, but no. So it works out nicely.
Oh, lucky you. You don't have the curse. You're so lucky.
It's true. So, Camille, where can people find you online if they want to connect with you?
I am on Twitter and Instagram at Camille Perri. I'm also on Facebook, but I'm probably a little bit better at Twitter and Instagram.
That's great. Thank you. So that is all for this episode. Thank you so much, Camille.
Thank you. This was really great, and thank you so much for having me.
So, I'm Tara. You've been listening to Let's Do Books. Remember to email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with your questions or comments. If you're an author who's interested in joining me on this show to talk about the lesfic you love or the trends that have you interested, please let me know. If you've enjoyed this episode, please check out the show notes where you'll find a Patreon link for the Lesbian Talk Show. Our patrons get exclusive content like bonus podcasts that no one else gets access to. You can also join our Facebook group, the Lesbian Review Book Club, to talk about these books and anything else you're reading and loving. To find this and many other great shows, all you need to do is search for The Lesbian Talk Show on iTunes, Podbean, or Stitcher.